St. Agnes Private School. As I walked through the towering iron gates of St. Agnes Private School, a shiver ran down my spine. An oppressive weight of the dark, Gothic buildings seemed to bear down on me, casting long, eerie shadows across the cobblestone courtyard. My heart raced with a mixture of excitement and trepidation as I embarked on my new job as a teacher. But little did I know the horrors that awaited me within those ancient walls. My journey to this eerie institution had begun months earlier, during a desperate search for employment. Teaching positions had been scarce, and I was on the brink of despair when I received an email from St. Agnes Private School. The message was cryptic, offering me a job with generous compensation and a promise of unique challenges. Curiosity had compelled me to attend the interview, and it had taken place in a dimly lit room with ornate antique furniture. The headmistress, a stern woman with piercing eyes, had asked questions that felt more like a psychological evaluation than a job interview. But despite the strange atmosphere, the allure of the prestigious institution, and the generous salary convinced me to accept the offer. Little did I know that my decision to teach at St. Agnes would lead me into a nightmarish world of secrets and darkness that no amount of money could ever justify. Upon my arrival at St. Agnes, I was introduced to the school's peculiar staff. There's Professor Hawthorne, the enigmatic historian who spoke in riddles and always seemed to be hiding something. Miss Winthorpe, the ageing librarian, who had an unsettling habit of whispering to the ancient tomes in the library, as if they held the answers to some unspeakable mystery. And then there was Mr. Blackwell, the groundskeeper, whose gaunt appearance and hollow eyes sent chills through me every time I saw him. They greeted me with polite smiles that never reached their eyes, but I couldn't shake the feeling that they were guarding some dark secret. After a brief introduction to my fellow teachers, I was led to my living quarters. The building was a decrepit, ivy-covered structure at the far end of the campus. Inside, the air was damp and heavy, and the walls bore the marks of centuries gone by. The room assigned to me was small and sparsely furnished, with a creaky bed and a single dimly lit window that overlooked the ancient graveyard surrounding the school. As I settled in, a chill settled into my bones, and I couldn't help but wonder what lay in wait within the confines of St. Agnes Private School. It was already becoming increasingly clear that this job was perhaps far more than I had bargained for, and the unsettling feeling of dread grew stronger with each passing moment. The following morning, I made my way to the grand dining hall, where the staff had gathered for breakfast. The hall was a cavernous space, with vaulted ceilings adorned with ancient chandeliers that cast eerie, flickering light over the room. The long wooden tables were arranged in a U-shape, with the teacher's table at the head. As I took my seat among the sombre-faced educators, the atmosphere in the room was stifling. Conversations hushed as I entered, and the staff exchanged furtive glances. It was clear that I was an outsider in this tight-knit community, and their reluctance to include me in their discussions only added to my unease. Professor Hawthorne sat across from me, his piercing gaze fixed on me as he sipped his tea. Miss Winthorpe seemed lost in thought, her eyes darting nervously towards the towering bookshelves that lined the hall. Mr. Blackwell was absent, and his empty chair cast a shadow over the table. I tried to engage in polite conversation, asking about the students and the curriculum, but the responses were vague and evasive. It was as though they were all bound by some unspoken oath of secrecy. As breakfast concluded, I couldn't shake the feeling that I was an intruder in a space where darkness and mystery thrived. The sense of foreboding that gripped me since my arrival only deepened. My first day of teaching at St. Agnes had arrived, cloaked in a strange aura of dread. I made my way to my classroom, the echoes of my footsteps reverberating in the empty corridor. The hallway was lined with portraits of past headmasters, their stern faces staring down at me with disapproval. Upon entering the classroom, I was greeted by rows of old wooden desks, each one etched with the names of students long gone. The air felt heavy, as if centuries of history weighed down on me. I glanced at the chalkboard, which bore the remnants of lessons from a bygone era. As the clock ticked, the students filed in one by one, their expressions as sombre as those of the staff. Their uniforms were formal, and they carried an air of formality that seemed unusual for children their age. I began my lesson, but their responses were subdued, and I couldn't help but notice that their eyes, it seemed to me, held a hint of fear. As the day progressed, I couldn't escape the eerie feeling that something was amiss. Whispers of strange occurrences in the school's history had reached my ears. Tales of students disappearing, of unexplained phenomena, and of the dark secrets that were said to lurk within these halls. As the final bell rang, I watched the students file out, their faces marked by a mixture of relief and trepidation. In the days that followed, my unease at St. Agnes Private School grew steadily. The students continued to attend my classes with a sense of apprehension, as though they carried the weight of some unspeakable burden. They rarely spoke to each other, and their eyes darted nervously around the classroom. My interactions with the staff remained cold and distant. They seemed to go about their duties with an air of resignation, as if they were bound by some malevolent force that held them captive within the school's walls. Professor Hawthorne's cryptic remarks and Miss Winthorpe's whispers to the ancient times took on an even more sinister undertone. I was feeling isolated and desperate for any distraction from the unnamed and unknown dread that seemed to hang over me, thick as a fog. One evening, as I ventured into the school's labyrinthine library, I stumbled upon a dusty, leather-bound hidden journal, hidden away on one of the shelves. Its pages were filled with writings of past teachers, all of whom had chronicled their growing unease and their suspicions that something was terribly wrong at St. Agnes. As I read, I learned on of the school's dark history, of supposed rituals performed in secret, and of the disappearance of students and teachers who had dared to delve too deeply into the mysteries that shrouded the institution. The journal spoke of a malevolent presence that had haunted St. Agnes for generations, a presence that fed on fear and despair. Terrified, but determined to uncover the truth, fact or fiction, I began to investigate further. It's not really like I had anything better to do. I delved into the school's archives, seeking answers. I found file after file, report after report of absent students, letters written by former teachers inquiring about their health and whereabouts, interspersed with occasional memos assuring the teacher the child was fine, and then eventually followed up with notes from the headmaster or headmistress at the time, explaining that the student had withdrawn from classes and returned home because of an illness, the death of a family member, lack of funds, or some other inane excuse. I noticed very quickly, however, that no two of these files ever seemed to have been written by the same hand, as if countless teachers had reported children missing, only to find themselves the next to disappear. The more I uncovered, the more I realised that I was not only a teacher at St. Agnes, but also a prisoner to its chilling secrets. I should have left then, gone to the police, and reported all that I had found. But I was already ensnared by this mystery. Each night, as I lay in my dimly lit room, I could feel a malevolent presence closing in, and the whispers of the past echoed through the corridors. I had unwittingly stepped into a nightmare, and somehow I knew the only way out was to confront the horrors that lurked within the school, no matter the cost. As my investigation into the dark secrets of St. Agnes Private School deepened, my suspicions about the headmistress, the enigmatic woman who had interviewed me, grew more sinister with each passing day. It was becoming increasingly clear that there was something profoundly unnatural about her. During one of the school's gatherings, I caught a glimpse of her in a moment of vulnerability. Her eyes, which were usually piercing and cold, flickered with a strange, otherworldly glow. For just a moment, I was certain then that not all was as it seemed to be. I began to discreetly inquire about the headmistress, but my questions were met with hushed whispers and warnings. In fact, it seemed as if the mere mention of her name struck terror into the hearts of the staff and students alike. Determined as I was to uncover the truth, the mystery only deepening, I decided to follow her one night, hoping to discover what she did behind the closed doors of her office. As I lurked in the shadows of the school's dimly lit corridors, I watched as she entered her office and locked the door. There, my eye pressed up against the keyhole of the old bronze handle of the door, I saw her in a form that defied all reason. Her skin seemed to ripple and shift, taking on a texture that was more akin to marble than flesh. Her eyes glowed with an otherworldly light, and her fingers elongated into claws. It was a transformation that could not be explained by natural means. Terrified by what I had witnessed, I retreated to my room, my mind reeling with the implications of what I had seen. It was becoming increasingly clear that the headmistress was not human, and her malevolent presence was at the heart of the school's dark secrets. But with this revelation came the chilling realization that I was now marked as a threat to whatever sinister force controlled St. Agnes. My pursuit of the truth had placed me in grave danger, and the horrors that awaited me within the school's walls were beyond anything that I could have imagined. The following day, a heavy cloud of tension hung over St. Agnes Private School. I made my way to my classroom, my heart weighted down by the disturbing events of the previous night. As the students filed in, I couldn't help but notice the absence of one young girl, Emily, who had always sat in the front row. I inquired about her whereabouts, my voice trembling with concern. The other students exchanged fearful glances and stammered that Emily hadn't been seen since the previous evening. Panic spread among them, and their hushed whispers hinted at something far more sinister than mere disappearance. Desperate to find answers, I rushed to the headmistress's office, my heart pounding with dread. I demanded to know what had become of Emily, but the headmistress's demeanour remained icily composed. She claimed to know nothing of the girl's whereabouts and insisted that I return to my duties. But her facade of innocence only deepened my suspicions. I was certain that the headmistress held the key to Emily's disappearance and to the malevolent force that seemed to plague this school. Determined to uncover the truth, I began to investigate Emily's disappearance on my own. I questioned the students, piecing together fragments of information that hinted at a horrifying meeting that had taken place the previous night. A meeting that involved Emily and the headmistress herself. As I delved deeper into the mystery, I discovered a description in the journal of a hidden chamber beneath the school. A chamber filled with ancient symbols and inscriptions that spoke of dark forces and unholy pacts. I began to search for its entrance, sneaking through the winding halls of the school in the wee hours of the night, when I thought myself least likely to be discovered. During the time I was searching, my class began to get smaller and smaller. It seemed as if a new student failed to show up for lessons every week and never returned. It took 3 long weeks of searching before at last I found it. Hidden behind a tapestry in the library, the entrance of a long, winding stone hallway led me deep under the ground beneath the school. It was a place of unspeakable horror, and it confirmed my worst fears about the headmistress's true nature. With each revelation, my determination to confront the malevolent force that ensnared St. Agnes private school grew stronger. I knew that I was now on a collision course with unspeakable evil, and the fate of Emily and the other students hung in the balance. The darkness that had enveloped the school was closing in, and the final, harrowing confrontation was drawing near. With trepidation and a flashlight in hand, I ventured further into the hidden chamber beneath the school. The air grew colder, and the oppressive atmosphere weighed on me as I moved deeper into the labyrinthine darkness. In the chamber's dim light, I stumbled upon a gruesome sight that sent shivers down my spine and churned my stomach. At the centre of a circle of ancient symbols, I found an ornate stone altar stained with blood. Upon it lay a tattered book filled with incantations and macabre drawings, clearly the source of the malevolent forces that haunted the school. But what chilled me to my core was the realisation that Emily's fate had been sealed within this unholy place. Her lifeless body was bound to the altar, her innocent eyes forever frozen in a terror-stricken gaze. It was evident that she had been the victim of a nightmarish ritual conducted by the headmistress, and perhaps others who served this malevolent force. My hands trembled as I photographed the scene with my cell phone, determined to gather evidence of this horrifying discovery. Emily's death had not been a mere disappearance. It had been a gruesome sacrifice in the name of some ancient and unspeakable entity, and I had no way of knowing what happened to the other students who had stopped appearing for classes. As I left the chamber, the weight of the horrors I had uncovered pressed heavily on my shoulders. It was clear that the headmistress and whatever accomplices she had were steeped in dark arts and had consigned the school to a living nightmare. The only path forward was to confront the evil that had taken root within the school and do whatever it took to end its reign of terror. But little did I know that my pursuit of justice would plunge me even further into a nightmarish abyss, where the boundaries between the living and the dead blurred, and where that malevolent force that controlled the school would stop at nothing to protect its secrets. Determined to bring the horrors of the school to light and seek the help at last of the authorities, I made my way towards the imposing iron gates the following night, my heart racing with fear and resolve. The chilling wind howled through the courtyard, carrying with it a haunting whisper of the malevolent presence that lurked within. But just as I reached for the gate, a skeletal hand clamped down on my shoulder with a vice-like grip. I spun around to find Mr. Blackwell, the groundskeeper, standing there, his gaunt face contorted into a sinister grin. "You can't leave, teacher," he hissed, his voice dripping with malice. I tried to wrench free, but his grip only tightened. His eyes, once hollow, now bore a malevolent fire that chilled me to my very core. "Why can't I leave? What have you people done here?" I demanded, my voice trembling. Blackwell's laughter was a haunting sound, echoing through the courtyard. "You're in too deep now, teacher. You know our secrets. You won't be allowed to reveal them." Desperation coursed through me, and I struggled against him, but his strength seemed otherworldly. I realised that I was trapped, caught in the clutches of this sinister force that had ensnared the entire school. As the minutes passed, it became clear that there was no escape. Whatever force that controlled St. Agnes had no intention of letting me leave with the evidence of its dark deeds. The groundskeeper's grip remained unyielding, and the nightmarish reality of my situation closed in, leaving me no choice but to confront the evil that had taken root within these cursed walls. With each passing moment, Blackwell's grip on me grew stronger, and I could feel my own strength wane as he inexorably dragged me back into the school. I fought against him with every ounce of my being, but it was as if he drew strength from some unnatural source. As we crossed the threshold into the dimly lit corridors of St. Agnes, a sense of hopelessness washed over me. Whatever presence that lurked within these walls seemed to press in tighter, suffocating me with dread. Blackwell's malevolent laughter echoed through the hallways, as he dragged me deeper into the heart of the school. It became apparent that he was not alone in this sinister plot. Shadowy figures, both staff and students, appeared from the darkness, their eyes empty and soulless. "We can't allow you to expose our secrets," one of them hissed, their voice devoid of any touch of humanity. They herded me into the dimly lit chamber that I had trespassed upon, where the headmistress awaited, her eyes glowing with an unholy light. The altar, still stained with Emily's blood, stood as a gruesome reminder of the horrors that had taken place here. I was trapped, and I realised that my only chance of survival was to confront the evil head-on. With a deep breath and a resolve born of desperation, I stepped forward, ready to uncover the truth and to put an end to the nightmarish reign of terror that had consumed the school. As I stood before the assembly in that dimly lit chamber beneath St. Agnes, a chilling sense of dread gripped my heart. The headmistress's otherworldly presence dominated the room, and the shadowy figures that surrounded me were entirely devoid of any scrap of humanity. "I demand to know the truth," I shouted, my voice quavering with fear and determination. "What is this? What are you? What happened to Emily?" The headmistress's unnaturally luminous eyes burned to mine, and a wicked smile twisted her lips. "You have uncovered more than you were ever meant to know, teacher," she replied, her voice a haunting melody. "But you will not live to reveal our secrets." With a wave of her hand, I was forcibly restrained by unseen forces, my limbs immobilized as if trapped in an invisible vice. Panic surged through me as I realized the true extent of the malevolent power that held me captive. As the headmistress approached, her fingers elongated in claws, and her inhuman features became more pronounced. It was a grotesque transformation, one that defied all logic and reason. But I refused to yield to terror. I summoned every ounce of courage I had left, and forced my hands to reach into my pocket, pulling out the photographs on my cell phone that I had taken of Emily's grisly fate in the hidden chamber. With trembling hands, I held them up for all to see. Look! Look at what you've done! You monsters! Look at what you've done to her! You won't get away with it! You can't! Look! Look! I cried, desperation fueling my voice. The room oddly fell into a stunned silence, as the damning evidence of their malevolence hung in the air. The headmistress's composure shattered, and a feral rage contorted her features. In that moment, when the facade dropped, the force lost its grip on me, and I seized the opportunity to break free. I darted towards the chamber's exit, the echoes of their angry shouts and sinister laughter following me through the darkened hallways. With each step, I knew that my pursuit of the truth had brought me closer to the heart of evil that had consumed the school. But my only hope now was to escape the grasp of the headmistress and her sinister followers, and to seek help from the outside world, no matter the cost. I raced through the labyrinthine corridors of the school, the echoes of the malevolent assembly's sinister laughter still ringing in my ears. Whatever force controlled this school pursued me, its presence an ever-encroaching darkness that threatened to engulf me. As I neared the entrance, the iron gates loomed ahead like a lifeline to the outside world. But just as I reached them, a spectral figure materialised in front of me, blocking my path. It was Emily, her eyes hollow and vacant, a mere echo of the vibrant girl she had once been. "You can't escape," she whispered, her voice a haunting echo. "They won't let you." Desperation welled within me as I realised that I was trapped between the malevolent assembly behind and the ghostly aspiration of Emily in front. There was no way out, no escape from the nightmarish reality that had consumed the school. And then, as if guided by some unseen force, I remembered the tattered book of incantations that I had found on the altar in the hidden chamber. In my moment of desperation, I reached into my pocket and pulled it out. With trembling hands, I began to blindly recite incantations, the words forming an ethereal barrier between me and the malevolent presence. The room seemed to shimmer and distort. The courtyard taking on strange and weird shadows. Emily's ghostly figure let out a mournful wail before disappearing into the darkness. I burst through the iron gates and stumbled out, past the moonlit courtyard and into the road, desperate for breath. The malevolent force within St. Agnes howled in frustration, its power waning as I distanced myself from the accursed school. As I fled, the weight of the horrifying truth I had uncovered bore down upon me. St. Agnes Private School was a place where malevolent forces and dark rituals held sway, and Emily's tragic fate was a testament to the evil that had taken root within its walls. But my mission was far from over. I had escaped, somehow, with my life, but the malevolent force that controlled the school still exists, and its secrets needed to be exposed. With the evidence I had gathered, I would seek help from the authorities, determined to put an end to the nightmarish reign of terror that gripped the private school. The weight of the damning evidence I carried gnawed at my conscience, driving me to seek help and expose the force that plagued the school. I raced towards the nearest town, my mind a whirlwind of thoughts and emotions. Upon reaching the town, I made my way to the local police station. My breaths ragged, my clothes dishevelled, and my eyes wide with terror. I recounted the horrors that I had witnessed at St. Agnes, providing the photographs and the tattered book of incantations as proof of the malevolent activities that had taken place within the school's walls. The police officers listened with a mixture of disbelief and concern etched upon their faces. Nevertheless, they could not ignore the evidence that I presented. A sense of urgency filled the room as they mobilised, their radio chatter filling the air with static as they prepared to investigate the mysterious and sinister occurrences at St. Agnes Private School. Returning to the school, accompanied by a squad of officers, I felt a mixture of relief and trepidation. The force within St. Agnes had grown quiet, but I knew that it was far from defeated. The officers, armed with a patronising sort of determination and flashlights, followed me through the dark corridors as we made our way to the hidden chamber. Upon entering that chamber, the officers gasped in horror at the sight before them. The altar stained with blood, the ancient symbols, and the remnants of the malevolent rituals and sacrifices that occurred within. The truth was laid bare, and the officers exchanged grim looks, understanding the gravity of the situation at long last. And that was when I watched in horror as the police officers, once my allies, turned on me. Their eyes, once filled with concern and determination, were now pitch black, reflecting the strange light that emanated from the ancient symbols carved into the walls of the chamber. They approached me with a robotic, almost trance-like precision, their movements devoid of any human warmth. I tried to protest, to plead for my life, but my voice faltered as I realised the extent of that malevolent force's control over them. They handcuffed me to the very altar that had witnessed countless unholy rituals, its surface cold and unforgiving beneath my trembling hands. Mr. Blackwell stepped forward, his gaunt face contorted with a triumphant smile. "Thank you, officers, for your assistance," he said, his voice laced with satisfaction. "You have played your part well. Now the ritual can be completed, and our power shall be unmatched." The officers remained silent, their black eyes fixed on me, devoid of any emotion or recognition. It was as if their humanity had been snuffed out, leaving behind only empty vessels under the malevolent influence of the dark forces that controlled them. Desperation surged within me as I realised the enormity of the danger that I was in. I strained with all my might against the handcuffs, but they held firm. Mr. Blackwell began to chant incantations in a language I couldn't comprehend, the words resonating with some ancient power. The symbols on the walls glowed brighter, casting eerie shadows across the chamber. As the ritual intensified, I could feel an oppressive force pressing down on me, squeezing the air from my lungs. The very fabric of reality seemed to warp and twist, and I knew that I was teetering on the edge of something unimaginably sinister. In my final moments, I whispered a desperate plea for help, hoping against hope that someone, somewhere, would hear my cries. But as Mr. Blackwell's chants reached a crescendo, the darkness swallowed me whole, and I was consumed by an abyss of terror and despair. The chamber fell silent, the malevolent force sated by the completion of the ritual. Outside, the world carried on, oblivious to the horrors that had transpired within the cursed walls of St. Agnes Private School. The malevolent force had triumphed, its power growing stronger with each sacrifice. Each year, more students arrive for the opportunity at the prestigious institution for tutelage. and in the heart of the darkness, I became but a distant memory, a whisper of a lost soul, forever entwined with the malevolent forces that lurk in the shadows. Nothing more than words inked on the pages of the very same journal I had discovered in the library all those years ago. The very same journal that you now hold in your hands.